If you want horror with ancient grandeur, adventure, and even tragic romance, you go with Gothic horror. If you want horror with deep thoughts about time and the universe, you go with cosmic horror. If you're looking for something with a bit of charm and dark whimsy, that's folk horror. But if you want that squirming in your gut sense of visceral disgust, well, you need body horror. And today I'm getting knee-deep into the blood and guts of this just plain gross, in a good way, version of horror, and explaining how you bring it to your next Pathfinder 1E adventure. But before we begin, if you'd like to take your game further, join the D6 Damage Discord. We have fantastic discussions about all aspects of the game, character builds, strategy guides, world building, and much, much more. You'll find a link to our Discord in the description of this video. Now then, how to implement body horror into your Pathfinder 1E game. The first way is including elements of body horror in the environment. One way to do this is with set pieces, as well as locations. Here are a few examples. Trees with human skin. A house with long strands of black hair coming out of the vents and drains. A long cave tunnel that progressively becomes more and more intestine-like. An elevator full of blood. A beach covered in the decaying remains of unknown creatures. You have a lot of room for creativity here. Another more mechanically intensive option are hazards. Here are a few options I think really have that body horror flavor. First up, rot grubs. Unlike diseases, parasite infestations are not removed by saving throws, and they're not prevented by immunity to disease. The rot grub infestation occurs when a small group of grubs, this is typically 1d6 individuals, bursts from a rotting corpse and attempts to burrow into a new host. On the first round after the grubs start burrowing, they can be burned off. This kills the grubs and inflicts 1d6 fire damage to the host. The round after that, the grubs will need to be cut out. This requires a bladed weapon and a DC 20 heal check. The damage dealt is 1d6 slashing damage per round the infestation has been in effect. To infest a new host, the grubs burst from a dead old host. The presence of rot grubs can be noticed with a DC 15 perception check, and they can be dodged with a DC 15 reflex save. Next, grasping graves. Rotting hands erupt from the ground and make grapple checks against all creatures in the area of effect. The hands have a combat maneuver bonus of plus 12. Grappled creatures take 1d6 plus 4 damage and are unable to move. This effect happens at the end of each creature's turn, and the effect is renewed with a plus 17 bonus to maintain the grapple. A typical grasping grave zone is 60 feet. Finally, there's the suicide cops. Each hour a creature spends in the area of effect, it must make a DC 16 will save or be affected by the spell Terrible Remorse. This causes the creature to deal 1d8 plus strength damage to itself per round for 10 rounds. 3 consecutive saves grants immunity to this effect for 24 hours. The area that a suicide cops can affect is pretty flexible. It can cover a small area or an entire forest. All these effects are good against players, but they're great against NPCs. Seeing companions, people under their protection, or allied guards infected by flesh-eating parasites, ripped apart by undead hands, or staring off into the middle distance before pulling out a sword and... well, it can be very effective at creating an atmosphere of horror. The next way to introduce body horror into your game is with body horror monsters. First up, let's talk about the kyton. For all you Hellraiser fans, these lawful evil outsiders have such sights to show the players unlucky enough to encounter them. Many kytons use chains as weapons, and have abilities that cause pain and disabling effects. The Pain Gang comes in a wide variety of subversions, from the small, familiar-sized augur to the iconic chain-wrapped evangelists, spreading the good word of suffering wherever they go, to the powerful demagogue, who, at a whopping CR26, are more than capable of creating a true hell on earth. Another great option are undead. You have all kinds of ways to use body horror with the undead, such as plague zombies. You can tap into that fear of disease and decay, or just live out your favorite zombie movie with this nasty sub-variety of The Walking Dead. Not only do they spread the zombie rot disease with every attack, they explode upon death, dealing damage to all around them. There are also bloody skeletons. Unlike their clean, bleached variants, these walking calcium deposits are cloaked in gore and viscera. This crimson coating gives them fast healing and deathless, which returns them to unlife after an hour, and they can only be permanently destroyed by positive energy. Finally, consider necrocraft. These undead constructs are a sort of DIY undead that you can kit out with all kinds of literal body mods, such as an extra head for all-round vision, bladed fists for bleeding damage, a putrid odor to nauseate living enemies, and much, much more. These guys are created by mashing together pre-existing undead into one super undead. And as any Dark Souls player can tell you, that's neato. Now, let's talk about Aboleth. These ancient aquatic beings of tentacles and sinister intent fill a more Lovecraftian cosmic horror role. But they have a few body horror tricks up their slimy sleeves. Aboleth have the ability to dominate monsters. This allows them to control the minds of mortals, be them human, goblin, orc, or what have you. Then the Aboleth will use its slimy mucus on the poor unfortunate souls it's entranced, which then undergo a terrifying transformation. Their skin becomes transparent, and they gain the ability to breathe water, but lose the ability to breathe air. Next, sinspawn. It's time to thank Pope Gregory I for coming up with a nice system for flavoring monsters. Pathfinder 1e has 7 grotesque monstrosities that vaguely correspond to the 7 deadly sins: lust, gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, envy, and pride. Each is a grotesque amalgam of weird body parts. And unlike some of the more based creatures that your players may have encountered, these guys are intelligent enough to have class levels, and they have class preferences. Envy tend to go for rangers. Gluttony, fighters. Greed, rogues. Lust, sorcerers. Pride, wizards. Sloth, clerics. And of course, wrath, barbarians. A full group with class levels on par with your party will be a fight that's both frightening and very dangerous. Finally, I would like to talk about the fleshwarped. These are the products of unholy drow magic. Flesh-warped creatures come in a variety of types based on the creature that those nasty drow alchemists had to work on. The most famous and iconic is, of course, the Drider. This is a drow, head, arms, and torso with the lower body of an enormous spider. And frankly, they tend to be a little too pretty to be what you're looking for in body horror. But there are plenty of others that can fill that role, such as the Omnits. These weird fungus mushroom creatures were once gnomes. Or the Grothlet. With a face that only Grandfather Nurgle could love, these slug-like monsters were once human. Or there's the Gooblisk. With exoskeletons and stinger-tipped tentacles for arms, who'd have guessed that these freaks were once goblins? There's also the Jashoi, resembling Jinminken, a dog-like yokai with a human face. These creatures started life as halflings, and hopefully they don't remember that. Finally, there's the Oronek. This more skin-crawling cousin of the Drider is half orc, half centipede, and all freaky. Finally, let's talk about body horror that you use on your players. This is the gold cup, the brass ring, the thing you most want to do with body horror in your TTRPG. And here are the tools to make your DM dreams and your players' nightmares a reality. First up, flesh crafting. The shapers and alchemists of the Drow are nothing if not industrious. And they can produce a wide variety of replacement parts for their PC guests. After, of course, they've had a nice Drow poison nap. First up, antenna. These will cost somebody a healthy 70,000 gold pieces. They replace a creature's eyes with antenna-like stalks coming from the sockets, in true Jinji Ito fashion. The creature gains blind sense out to 30 feet, but is blind. Another option is the cerebral husk. This costs 60,000 gold pieces. One time per day, on a failed save against a mind effect, a creature can auto-succeed, taking 1d6 constitution damage. That is only cured by resting. The penalty for this implant is the creature takes a -2 on all intelligence-based checks. There's also Grasping Tendril. This costs 22,000 gold pieces. It can be grafted to the chest slot, where this tentacle can retrieve stowed items as a swift action. The graft can also replace a lost arm, but weapons wielded with the tentacle take a -2 to attack rolls. There's also Poison Fangs. This gives a creature a bite attack appropriate for its size, and the ability to poison targets with its bite 3 times per day. The DC for the poison is 15 plus its con modifier. The poison deals 1d3 strength damage for 3 rounds. If a creature has been gifted Poison Fangs, it takes a -2 on all charisma checks except Intimidate. Poison Fangs cost 12,000 gold pieces. Finally, let's talk about corruption. A player with corruption is slowly being transformed into a monster, gaining new abilities as they go until ultimately becoming an NPC under the DM's control. The first thing to understand about corruption are corruption stages. There are 4 stages of corruption: 0, 1, 2, and 3. The first 3, that's 0, 1, and 2, the player is still themselves, to one extent or another. But at stage 3, the battle is over and the PC is lost to the corruption. At certain times, as determined by the story and the dungeon master, the player is pulled toward the darkness and must attempt a saving throw against the corruption. The type of save will differ based on the form of the corruption. It will be either will or fortitude, but the number is determined by the player's manifestation level. The player's manifestation level is equal to the number of manifestations they have. You gain a new manifestation at roughly every 2 levels. 1 at first, 2 at third, 3 at 5th, etc. Your manifestation level can never go over 9th. The DC of your corruption save will be 15 plus your manifestation level, maximum DC 24. The save against the corruption cannot be modified by effects that give bonuses or penalties. It's a flat roll. Now, let's talk about those manifestations. They are visible representations of the corruptions consuming the player. Each manifestation has both a gift, a beneficial effect, and a stain, a negative effect. As an example, the unconscious agenda manifestation of the Aboleth corruption has the gift as an immediate action. You can reroll a save against a compulsion effect, as well as the stain. You take a -2 penalty against the compulsion effects cast by aberrations. Now, let's talk about the different types of corruption that your players might be affected by. First up, Aboleth. You've made very good friends with an evil psychic fish. The Accursed. This one is pretty open. It could represent a lot of things, such as the corrupting magic of a hag, genie, or the fae, as it consumes a player's soul. Next, Deep One. You may have a root of your family tree underwater. Demonic. The powers of the abyss are slowly changing a PC into a fiend. Ghoul. Dead bodies are starting to look awfully tasty. Hellbound. You didn't read the fine print of that contract you signed, and now you're on the road to lawful evil. Hive. This one is straight out of The Fly. Hope you wanted to be a bug. How Kafkaesque. Lich. Creating a phylactery is harder than it sounded in that old grimoire. Now you're slowly rotting away. Lycanthropy. It starts with a player naked in the woods covered in blood and ends basically the same way. Plagued. Grandfather Nurgle has blessed you, player. Possessed. The voices in that player character's head are getting louder, and their blackouts are getting longer. Promethean. This one is interesting. Basically, an affected character is slowly replacing parts of their body with machine, or wood, or stone, and gradually becoming a construct. Shadowbound. The fell powers of the Shadowlands are slowly draining a player character of humanity. Finally, vampirism. Fortunately, sparkling is not one of the manifestations. Thank you very much for watching this guide to body horror in Pathfinder 1E. If you are in the market for gaming accessories, like dice, rulebooks, and miniatures, check out Noble Knight Games. You'll find an affiliate link in the description of this video. And if you're in the market for a good old-fashioned haunted house adventure, check out Sorceress, the Dietrich House, available right now on Drive-Thru RPG.